You're listening to the Beat Motel Zine podcast, and we need to warn you that we use words like shit, bollocks, scrotics, fuck, anarcho-syndicalist, and cunt, and we don't normally beat those words out, apart from the word cunt, because we're not total animals. Now, we know as well as you that your children can hear these words on any street in Britain, possibly any street anywhere in the world, but we also appreciate that you may not want to invite these words into your home if you have children or sensitive pets nearby whilst listening to this podcast. So listener discretion is advised. That being said, if your children aren't allergic to hearing words like fuck, shit, buttocks or hind penis, they might learn something from listening to this podcast, although probably not, because the quality of our educational content is quite poor. So there you go, fuckers, buckle in and let's get started. Hey, you're back with Beat Motel, and Sam is off on tour or some shit, so he's not here today. Oh, and I've already banged the microphone, which is a good start. And there's somebody doing I do not know what outside the studio today. So there's some interesting textural noises. I'm going to call it ambient music. But instead of Dr. Sam, I have Martin Whiskin. Are you a doctor?
No. I was trying to think of some sort of link that could make me but there's nothing. I've got nothing.
There's nothing. No hope of being a doctor at all.
Pretty much.
So I know Martin. I've known him for many years. In fact, your band played at my wedding reception. That's how long I've known you.
We did, yeah, and many years ago.
And I brought Martin along because he has the nicest microphone out of anyone I know.
Well, thank you. I need to do sort of a little warning. I'm sat at my desk today rather than in my vocal booth, and my kids are, of course, off on school holidays now. So if there's extraneous noises in the background, I do apologise. There could be screaming and shouting and crying.
But what about
that's
kids?
Just me. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I beat you to it there. Yeah, I don't know if you've heard the podcast before. I don't think those things really matter. I shouldn't worry.
Delete
right,
that bit.
So we have a cool theme today. This has been on the list of Beat Motel themes since we started, and I've been waiting for the right moment to do it. And it turns out the right moment to do it was getting a guest in and asking them what they wanted to do. So now, when we have a theme, it always means something slightly different to me to what it means to Dr. Sam. And I think it's probably going to be the case here. So do you want to explain the theme, Martin?
Yeah, so the theme is gigs from the past that I wish that I could go to again, I think was the theme. I think I've been a little bit slack with that theme on one of the answers. But yeah, it will make sense as I go through it, I think.
Cool. It sounds like we're fairly pretty much on the same tack here. But the key word there is gigs you could go to again. Yes. So it's not like, oh, I wish I'd gone to Woodstock, or I wish I was one of the 30,000 people who claimed they saw the Sex Pistols at Free Trade Hall, or wherever it was. So we'll get into that in a minute. But first of all, as is traditional, we're going to have a riff of the week. So first of all, we've got Martin's riff, and I'm going to play it, then you can tell us what it is.
They met on the dance floor on the 1st of May, and the baby that they had grew up to be a club DJ.
Who was that?
So the voice you heard was Benjamin Zephaniah, who passed away recently, the poet. But the band is called The Imagined Village, and it's like a folk supergroup who have sort of twisted and turned old folk songs. So this one specifically was from around 1549.
Wow.
And it's called Tam Lin. This is Tam Lin Retold by The Imagined Village. And yeah, it's a story that revolves around the rescue of Tam Lin by his true love, the Queen of the Fairies. So whether it's based in fact or not, I don't know. But this retelling is like more up to date version, I guess you would say.
The music really surprised me when I first heard it. I thought, okay, well, I know Martin likes sort of some folky stuff, and there's also what sounds like some Indian influences in there. I can't tell what the stringed instrument is, but it's not straight up traditional hey nonny nonny type English folk, is it?
No, it's not. Although Martin Carthy is part of the project, so he's from that very traditional folk sound. But there's a few younger members of the band as well who are obviously bringing in that. Well, there's elements of drum and bass in a few of the tracks as well. But yeah, there's an Indian element, and yeah, it goes all over the place. The album, there's a track with Billy Bragg on it, who's done The Hard Times of Old England with.
Sorry, I was just going to say, what's a good jumping in? Oh, dear God, sorry, I had coughing. What's a good jumping in point for the Imagined Village?
It was their first album. It's the Imagined Village.
That's the first one,
and that's it. Yeah. So that track is from 2007, but they've done 3 or 4 albums, I think, all along the same sort of vein in terms of taking old folk songs and reworking them for a modern audience. I guess trying to give people that. Because like you said, a lot of people look at folk music and think, "Oh, that's really boring and dull," which some of it is. But I think this is a way of bridging that gap and getting people to hear, the traditional stuff in a new way and learning where a lot of music come from in the first place.
Well, we've worked together and we've known each other a long time. We probably haven't spoken about music for quite a long time. Just for the listeners, Martin is part of a team that runs something called the Creative Collective, where basically we just go and hang out and sometimes talk about work. But when I last had conversations about music with you, I would have probably said I wasn't a fan of folk at all. And that's completely changed. Once I realised 2 really key things. The first one is that folk evolves and it constantly changes because that's the very nature of it. And yeah, I think it's kind of neat that some of it's ring-fenced as traditional old folk, and that doesn't change. That's sort of like is a snapshot of something. But the second thing I learned is that Bert Jansch is God. I heard Avocet, having not heard any Pentagram, that's a very different kind of band. Having not heard any Pentangle or anything, somebody only like in the last couple of years told me to go and listen to Avocet by Bert Jansch. And absolutely astonished by it. The production of it, just everything about it, so completely captivating. And then I found a 4K bit of footage of Pentagram or Pentagle. I'm getting confused between the two. One of them's like a 70s satanic doomer band, and the other one's
very different.
It's very different. Yeah, so cool choice. I really like that. One of the whole points of a Riff of the Week is just to kind of share something new, and that's absolutely something new to me. Is that something you're particularly into at the moment, or are you trying to? I'm not going to say you're trying to be smart, because you are smart.
No, I always go back to that. Yeah, I'm not smart. Let's get that out of the way. But I put on 2 of their later albums because they haven't done anything for a little while. But I didn't listen to at the time too much because I didn't think it was as good as the first album. But I basically had them on loop for a couple of months now, the later albums, because perhaps it was slightly different to the first album. And of course, when you have the first album of a band that is seemingly doing something new, it's incredible. It is a thing. And I think I got into the stage of, it's not as good as the first one. But now it is. I appreciate them so much, and I've had those on loop. But I wanted to pick something from the first one because it makes sense to start with the first album if you're introducing someone, I think.
I think it's a syndrome, because when you discover a band, the first album you hear by a particular band, it's very, very rare that the next thing you hear actually stands up to that, because you've lost the element of surprise. Yeah. So I tend to find that like second, third, fourth albums tend to be slow burners, and I'll probably listen to them actually for longer than I will the original, because the original, you start to realise that, okay, it's a band just sort of finding their feet. That's why I was surprised you told me that was from the first album, because it's so fully formed. Yeah, it's so just kind of so well realised.
It's what you were saying then about the follow up albums not sort of reaching expectation. I guess I think that I might have found a slight breaking that rule slightly is a band called Osric Tentacles, who have been going for years and years, like instrumental psychedelic rock, I guess. And I got their latest album the other day. It was released a couple of weeks ago, and all of their albums are exactly the same. You could put one on and not know which album it is. It could be any of the others. I'm sorry if there's any Osric fans out there who think otherwise. I really like them. I've got loads of their albums, but yeah, they're interchangeable. They're all just good, I think.
Some bands, I like bands that progress, but sometimes if you do something really well, it's like Jesus and Mary Chain Actually, no, they did progress. Anyway, I'm derailing myself here. One thing that surprised me about the video for Tam Lin is Benjamin Zephaniah in it. He gives the vocal delivery that you just heard there, and then it doesn't cut to anything else. It's just him sort of waiting. It's just, I don't know why that. It's sort of caught. I sort of found it. That sounds patronising. I found it quite endearing. He just sort of like stares in at the middle distance for a bit, and I thought that's an interesting choice, sort of stylistically.
Yeah, I wonder if it was a self-shot thing.
Maybe it was. So no, it's well pre-COVID.
Yes, 2007 was when the album was released. So it's probably 2006 maybe that it was actually recorded.
He's a very interesting man. We played a rare These Are End Times gig a couple of weeks ago, and our violinist dedicated the set to Benjamin Zephaniah, which I thought was really cool. It's amazing. People like this. It's always a cliche that you should appreciate them while they're around. But I didn't realise to the extent that Benjamin Zephaniah had a connection with so many people. He got a massive cheer when Cad, our violin player, said that. It was just like, wow, like the whole venue kind of actually it's big. It's louder than the cheer they gave us actually.
Just in case anyone listening doesn't know who it is, he was the priest. He was the priest in Peaky Blinders.
Oh, I haven't seen that. That wouldn't mean anything to me.
No, I was amazed when he was in it. I thought, oh, amazing! Like someone, because I knew him from. I think my first finding of him was in the Imagine Village, and see him in Peaky Blinders was great.
Oh wow! No, I sort of know him as someone who's sort of always around, and friends would mention him and talk about him, and there's not many poets knocking around, especially not poets with poets that come from a cultural angle that he did. No, it's cool stuff. Nice one, Benjamin. Right, I'm going to play my riff, which is, well, it's this. That when I first heard that, it's I can't say the band name or the act name because it's South Korean, so it's in it's a thing that looks like a couple of Roman columns and then something that looks like someone bending over while their knees are pointing the other way. And I can't really describe South Korean characters.
Oh, I've heard of them.
But I think the English translation roughly is I'll spell it Parannoul, Parannoul. But and that track was called Polaris, and it's from their later. No one knows. The interesting thing about this is it's thought to be one person, but it's someone who's anonymous.
I love that idea. I've always wanted to do a project that is just studio based and no one ever knows who it is.
See, we tried to do that in Zeeb, kind of wearing masks.
Yes.
just made sure everyone knew who we were because we're gobshites who told everyone. But I chose that as my riff of the week because we're talking earlier about the joy of finding new music and the sort of the real exciting, like the real physical exciting feeling that can give you. And I'm making my way through the Pitchfork Best 50 Albums of 2023. And I'm writing reviews for them. I ought to say, actually, we haven't told anyone. There is actually a Beat Motel website now, a proper website.
Awesome.
Beatmotel.com. So this was like number 46, I think. And I put it on and the album started, and the other three albums I've sort of liked, but not really. So the number 50 was the Andre 3000 Flute album. Have you heard that?
I haven't, no.
It's worth a listen.
Okay.
But probably one. It's a fuck sight better than I thought it would be. I've since writing the review, I've learned more about it, and he had some amazing like jazz artists involved in it. The next one was a band who sounded like they were recorded on a Nokia 8210. What are you doing? You spotted something up there.
No, I've got my CDs up there. I'm
Right.
looking out because there's a band that it reminded me of, and I'm trying to remember their name, and I can't see where the case. I was going to try and nab the case without being too obvious.
Actually, not here because I'm in the studio today, but my home studio. Yeah, I've got the CDs at the top, and I think sometimes people might think I'm just sort of like dozing off, or just my head goes back. And so I'm making my way through, and the album before this was like very gentle ambient kind of stuff. This one started, and I thought, oh my god, they sound like Keen or something.
Oh,
and then that bit where it kicks in and it lifts, that lift is phenomenal. That was real kind of like hairs up the back of my neck, and the whole album's just absolutely fantastic. And I really like the fact I've got no idea what the lyrics are.
It's one of those things. It felt really euphoric.
Yeah,
I think,
that God, what a word! Brilliant word.
And just like you're absorbed by the music, and I couldn't hear the vocal line too well there, but it was just a sort of a rush of sensation, I think. And that's the couple of CDs I was looking for up there. I was introduced to quite a few instrumental bands during lockdown, and one of them, the name escapes me, but it was exactly that sort of, it was a bit heavier, I think, so it's sort of based in hard rock, but really sort of euphoric, uplifting.
I'd love to know who that was.
9-10 minute tracks of just like almost like a constant build to a crescendo through 10 minutes, and it's just epic stuff.
If you remember, let us know, or just message me afterwards, because
yes, I will.
I love. There's a lot of really heavy instrumental stuff I like bands. God is an Astronaut, and there's Pelican, and it's like a whole genre. But I was quite surprised. I'm going through these 50 albums, and I'm deliberately not really looking up who the band is. I mean, it was hard not to know who Andre 3000 is. But I looked up who Parannoul were afterwards, and it's classified as shoegaze. And I was like, I didn't realise shoegaze was still a phrase that anyone actually used.
Isn't shoegaze is from the perspective of the people playing the music, isn't it? They're gazing down at whilst, or is it and that's
it was like a derogatory term in the NME or Melody Maker in the early 90s about bands who were more obsessed with their pedals than the performance or something. But it's sort of been claimed by a whole raft of bands. Cool. Right, we ought to move on to the actual topic, because we're nearly 20 minutes in here and we haven't actually talked about it. Intro done. Right, so let's play your first choice, and you can tell us what it is and why you chose it.
Spend 150 grand just to make something we want to see. I see your sister in a Sunday dress. She's out to please and bounce her best. She's out to take, no need to try. She's ready to make. It's so easy.
That kind of surprised me. And go on, tell us who it is and why you chose it. If you noticed, I ask you to speak each time you go to pick up your glass of water.
Yes, it's very annoying.
Have a sip of water?
No, it's fine. I'll just suffer from dry mouth.
I'm going to have some water now. Oh, lovely.
Oh, man. I'm really jealous. I'm going to do it.
Yay.
So, the band I chose for the first one was Guns N' Roses. And that's from a show they did on the Use Your Illusion tour in Paris in 1992. So I was 14 at the time. And this is the one that I didn't go to.
Oh, you didn't go to?
Yeah, so I'm slightly breaking the rules here. But I wanted to include this one because it follows on later. And it was the first, Guns N' Roses were the first band, I think, that turned my head away from buying, Now 10 and greatest hits of the 60s and stuff like that. Because, well, I was coming into that age where you find things, and music was one of them. And Guns N' Roses was my entry to, Guns N' things. Guns N' Roses was my entry into just something that started. Well, my life changed at that point. I think when I found music, I was on a path to, very much later in life, bands,
ruin your life.
Basically, yeah. But yeah, and the reason I picked it so easy because that was the opening track from the concert, and I had it on VHS that I taped off of ITV one night very late, And I wore that tape out watching it, thinking, oh my God, this is just incredible. And their stage presence and moving around, literally running across the stage, and just everything about it was a spectacle. You know, seeing this band that at the time I'd probably never heard of playing in front of thousands and thousands of people.
Was this like stadium era Guns N' Roses?
Yeah, so it was on their massive, like 20-year Use Your Illusion tour or whatever it was. But yeah, and at that, you know, later on, I've read that during those times they just didn't get on at all, and were, you know, on the verge of splitting pretty much the whole way through. But the reason I wanted to put it in is because of, you know, the journey that it set me on, that band, and it follows into a gig that I did actually go to many years later. Can I follow on to that one seamlessly?
No, we're going to make people wait for that.
Okay.
Guns N' Roses is one of those bands I kind of wish I liked. Yeah. I was such a snooty little indie kid at the time that a girlfriend actually dumped me because I told her Slash was a shit guitarist.
I mean, rightly so.
What's worse is it's the first girl I ever kissed, and she came to a gig I was playing at, the first gig I was playing at, and there's a whole other story there, and they were just the band that everybody liked. So being a stupid teenager, I didn't like them because everyone else did, and I tried to like them again when they played Glastonbury, and when they did like an 8.5 hour set, and I just didn't know enough of the music. But the start of that one really surprised me. If it wasn't for Axl Rose's voice, I would not have guessed that was Guns N' Roses.
It's from Appetite for Destruction, I think. Yeah.
It's really punk. It's not the pomp of Guns N' Roses, that track.
Yeah, I think the earlier stuff is definitely more sort of aggressive and brash. You know, when they were a lot younger, and the Use Your Illusion stuff just became massively produced. And actually, it was the Use Your Illusion stuff that I found or got into first before Appetite for Destruction. I used to prefer Use Your Illusion, but you know, but yeah, I understand almost the shame and embarrassment of liking Guns N' Roses. But at the time, all of my friends at school didn't like that sort of music. They were all into drum and bass.
Oh, really?
So to like Guns N' Roses, it was I was the odd one out and ridiculed for, not because it was Guns N' Roses, but because it wasn't drum and bass, basically.
See, my school, basically nobody liked music. No one,
really?
No one at all.
That's interesting.
I did not know anyone who was into music. I played in a band, and that was like seen as so strange. Well, until they realised that the gigs I was putting on in village halls, they could come and get drunk at. Then it was quite popular. But then Smells Like Teen Spirit came out, and Nevermind, and then suddenly everybody liked music, which meant that I then didn't like Nirvana. I missed out on so much music. I had such a prissy. Oh yeah, I can say I had a prissy bunch of friends. I'm only still friends with one of them now. But it's proof that if you're closed-minded to music, you just miss out, basically.
Yes.
Right, so I'm going to have to play my next track, which I've chosen for very different reasons. Oh, I hate the fact we can only play 30 seconds. That was Pelican with a little bit of a track called March into the Sea. I chose them for, actually, the reason's not massively different to why you chose Guns N' Roses. Metal was the enemy to me for so long. It was something I hated so much without ever really knowing why, or without particularly listening to much metal. And I went to go and see a band called Cave In.
I like Cave In.
Yeah, the garage in London, and the support band was Pelican.
Oh,
and
wow.
that bit of that track where they suddenly sort of do the riff, because the rest of it's all sort of wandering around, and the guitarist ended up being sent a DVD of this performance in London, not the one I was at, sadly, when Beat Motel was a paper zine, and just watching the guitarist play, it's one of those guitarists whose hands are just wonderful to watch. not sort of just really fluid and really just beautiful. But that heavy bit awoke something into me that means that, well, I mostly listen to black metal now. It's sort of like it set me off on a course. But I'd love to go back to that gig because, for one thing, Cave-In were absolute peak then. They were on Hydra Head at the time, and they were just putting out amazing music. But also to see Pelican again, because that was second album era, and I just wish I could see them play that again. I think I saw them twice I saw them not that long after, and I went with mutual friend Mafro in Brighton, and saw them then, supported by a band called Torch, who are absolutely amazing thing. Do you know, I've seen a bunch of bands I've got into have been because I've seen them supporting the band that I wanted to see and preferred them. I went to go and see a Polish band called Batushka in London last month. There's a review of it on Beat Motel podcast if you go back through the episodes. And the support band was a band called Kanonenfieber, who I preferred. So awesome. Maybe I ought to just start going to see bands I don't like because I might like the support band.
Just go home early then. It'd be brilliant.
Right, so let's move on to your next track.
When you're talking to yourself and nobody's home, and for yourself, in this world alone.
See, I like that bit when it comes in, but that first bit sounds like something from a low-rent, off-Broadway musical about dustbin men or something.
How dare you? So, again, Guns N' Roses for this one. And this song is from the Use Your Illusion albums. And it's, like I said, it's when they got into their, massively produced and, months in the studio just writing stuff. And this is like a 9-10 minute song sort of thing, in contrast to, the 2, 3, 4 minutes from Appetite for Destruction. But the reason I chose this one, and it is heavily linked to the first one, obviously. And in 2017, Guns N' Roses played in London. So they were back together with some of the original members. It was Axl, Slash, Duff, Dizzy, and then the rest were, I think, some from Axl's version of Guns N' Roses.
How many were there?
Oh, loads. There's a synth player. There's a drummer, obviously, and another guitarist. Maybe 2 other guitarists, actually. Blimey. They did have 3 at one point. So yeah, 2017, and I wanted to go because I wish I'd have gone the first time around, sort of thing, seeing them in their, what people thought were the days of power, the real strength of the band. So me and mutual friend Mafro went to London to see them in 2017, and we thought we could still hack it. So we just had our first kids at that point. And so mine was about 6 months old. So I hadn't been out for 6 months. And like the shows that they do in London, I think it was at the Olympic Stadium or whatever one.
Oh, wow.
They do stuff at. And yeah, we met up at like 2 p.m. because the doors opened at 4 or something stupid. So by the time we got there, we'd already been drinking on the way.
Oh, man.
Then you have like 4 hours before Guns N' Roses come on. So there's another 4 hours drinking. And the reason I wish I could go to this one is because I literally do not remember it.
Oh, man. How much were the tickets, though? Because it wouldn't have been a cheap gig.
Oh, it was at least £100 for a ticket.
It's shocking that now I think £100 doesn't sound too bad for a gig ticket when you got like, U2 charging £800 a ticket or whatever. Oh, £100 sounds quite reasonable.
Yeah. But again, I chose It's So Easy for the first one is because that's the first thing I heard when they came on stage was that. So they're still opening with it all these years later.
That's so cool. I like it when bands do that.
And that's there's a couple of other bits and pieces that I remember throughout, but on the whole, I have no idea what they played,
That is not a
really
reason.
disappointing. And the reason I picked Estranged is because they played that. I've seen the set list. I had a quick look at it yesterday, and it would have. And I love that song. Like, I still love that song, and it would have been incredible to see them play it live. But man, yeah, I don't regret much in this life, because I think it's a waste of time. But I wish I hadn't have got drunk that day, or at least that drunk.
I was sort of thinking of all these reasons, like why I would choose my four choices. I hadn't even considered something like that. I'm not sure I have ever been really blotto at a gig. I'm generally the one who drives. I've got an agreement with my bandmates, that I'll drive them to any gig if they buy me a ticket.
That's awesome.
And I've seen I've got into some bands through doing that, because it removes sort of all the risk for me, because there's no financial risk for the ticket. I don't have a car, but I borrow my wife's 20-year-old Prius, so it costs piss all to kind of travel anywhere. And yeah, I'm going to be giggling about that for ages. I wish I could go back, because I just don't remember.
My others have deeper meanings than just getting drunk.
That was a brilliant sort of misdirection, though. That was absolutely brilliant. Right, here's my next choice. Sometimes 30 seconds feels like quite a long time. Do you have a guess who that was?
Man,
I will be astonished. I will just hand over the keys to the podcast if you guess that.
The first thing I thought was that it reminded me of, and this is one that is a solo artist called Dan Hyam from Denmark, but it's like Viking music. And the sort of the tribal type drumming made me think of that. But yeah, I've got no idea.
Is it like Viking music but not metal?
Yeah, it's like more traditional, but done with like electronic stuff. If that makes sense. I'll send you a link afterwards.
Yeah, cool. Absolutely. Just assume that anything Vikings can be metal.
No, it's really not metal at all.
That was Fuck Buttons.
I've not heard of Fuck Buttons.
That was Fuck Buttons with a song called Brain Freeze. Now, I don't know if I should admit this on the podcast, because I know I'm friends with the guy who was their manager at the time, Declan. Hello, Declan. I doubt you're listening, but hello if you are. And I chose this because it's not necessarily the songs, because I don't listen to Fuck Buttons, but it's what it evokes in a very visceral way, in a way that I can remember incredibly clearly. So I have to give you the context. We went to ATP, so All Tomorrow's Parties festival in Butlins, and there is an episode about ATP, and it was snowing really heavily for the whole drive, so we had to drive all the way from Ipswich to Minehead, and that's about as far as you can drive in this country without plopping into the sea. And it was a miserable drive. It took like hours and hours and hours. And my friends in the back of the car were freezing cold, so we had to put the heat on. And I hate being hot in a car. It was just one of those journeys that's just awful, almost to the point where, on the news, they're like showing people on the M25 abandoning their vehicles and stuff. It was that kind of thing. And we got there, and I was so tense, and I was really uncomfortable. I was really, and there were people in the main indoor part of ATP Festival. Was like a huge cocktail lounge, or I can't remember what they call it. Exactly as you imagine a Butlins type place to be. And there were people giving head neck massages, and they were like 30 quid. Excuse me. And I just thought, God, I'm so uncomfortable. I'm so horribly, horribly uncomfortable. They were just like to the right of the stage, so not that far away from like the massive speaker stacks. And I paid me monies, and I sat down to have a massage just as Fuck Buttons was setting up. And I remember it's two people. I remember one of them putting a floor tom on the stage, and that's why I chose that track, because it might be one of the first ones they played. But anyway, I was having this massage, and it was amazing. My friends were horrified that I was letting like another woman touch me, which I still think's so prude and hilarious. And they started playing, and I was like, okay, I quite like this sort of electronic sort of weirdness, and it's not quite like what I'd think was like dance music. It's a bit more interesting to me than that. And then this incredible thing happened where all the lights in the entire room, and I'm not going to go on about it a lot because I think I've talked about it on the podcast before, every single light in the room then started switching on and off and like running relays, like racer relays around in perfect time to the music.
Wow.
And that, the relief of being there, being 2 or 3 pints in and having a massage, it was like an all body, all mind kind of immersive experience.
That's cool.
And many, many years later, I've made friends with, say, this guy Declan I know, who was their manager at the time. And I was like, how did you do that? And he went, wasn't us. I'm like, well,
Really?
who was it? Was it the promoters? And he's like, don't think so. They're not that they weren't that well organised. So someone at Butlins, thank you, whoever you are, took it upon themselves to, I don't know how they did it. They'd like, I'd like to think they were just there with like a whole panel of switches going,
yeah,
just like normal
live
switches like you get at home. But
yeah.
I felt sorry for the bar staff who were trying to serve and like were just like being thrown into complete pitch darkness.
That's cool. But like, it's nice when there's like a multi-sensory experience to a live show rather than just a band on stage playing. If it's lights, or if it's, I've seen bands with like massive visual, like psychedelic visuals in the background and all that sort of thing. It's really, really good when they pay a bit more attention, I think.
I think it's particularly important as well with electronic music. I saw Black Sabbath in Hyde Park, I don't know, years ago now. And they turned the whole stage into like a massive screen. And they only used it on 2 songs of the whole set.
Always.
It just seemed odd. It's like, well, you could go to all this effort and then just not bother for most of the rest of the set. But I think it's that sort of audio-visual thing is particularly important for electronic music, because I was on a lineup, and the promoter listed me on the flyer as, come and watch Andrew Culture stand behind a desk. So you do electronic, it can be kind of what it is. I was doing a project pre-COVID, and it was killed off by COVID, where I was speaking to blind musicians, and I have some experience of working with deaf people, and I was commissioned to make a musical piece that was going to be as accessible as possible to blind and deaf people, as well as hearing people. It's a concept I think is really, really interesting. So
I think we spoke about that before, but that's something could be, I think if you get the chance to pick that up, because it could be really powerful and important as well.
Yeah, no, I'm one of the many things I've got on my list. So let's go for your next choice.
We're gonna change the world. Forget the kings of dance, I tell the states and parks of higher ground. Do anything that we found and on the Riverflow.
I never noticed that double kick before, but who was that?
That is Levelers, and the song is called Riverflow from their album Leveling the Land. So when I was younger, many years ago, my sister lent me a cassette of couple of copied albums that from her boyfriend, who's actually now her husband, and on one side I think was Therapy, and on the other side was Levelers.
Screamanger?
Screamager would, it probably Trouble Gum. Yeah, that's a good album. That's a really good album. And I haven't seen Therapy live, but I imagine they're very hard hitting live. So I put this cassette on, and it was part way through, and Riverflow is the song that came on. And I thought, this is really this. So this was 19. When did that album come out? 91, I think, 92, something like that. But I would have been again coming into the age of finding music, and at this point, I would have only probably ever listened to Guns N' Roses and Red Hot Chili Peppers. They were the 2 bands that were my thing first off. And to hear this, it just sounded really fresh. I can't believe I just used that word, but fresh was the sort of feeling that I got from it. And again, all my friends were like, why are you listening to that? It's like guitars and, a little bit folky in a way. But it really grabbed me just because it felt so, this song in particular, so sort of jolly and bouncy. And I found my people around this band. So I started hanging out with a lot of other people who loved the Levelers and the whole sound and sort of movement around the band. And the gig that I did go to and wish that I could relive is when they played Brixton Academy in 1994. So I went for my birthday when I was 16. And it just sort of encapsulates a time in my life that was so special and brilliant and important for my growth as a person, I guess. And there, it was the times when there would be 10, 15 of you all jumping on the train to get to London to watch a band, and you'd all get drunk and just jump around and make fools of yourself and get the train home again. The times where you would sit in the park in the summer with your guitars and all just having a really great time. So this track specifically, one of my friends who I was started to hang around with at that time would bring his guitar out in the evenings when we were over the park, and he would play loads of Leveler songs, and I'd always make him play this song. And it was him and that song that made me then want to play guitar, because I was like, oh man, so good just being able to sit down and play songs for people. I want to do it. So there's a whole lot around this sort of time that formed my life, I think.
I always think it's interesting looking back to the sitting in the park days, because we thought we were being so naughty, drinking cider and smoking fags and stuff. But if you look back, it's actually really wholesome. It's like a really wholesome thing that we were doing. Obviously, not pre-internet, because it's been around for a long time. But that was how we spent time. We sat and we talked, and it sounds kind of pretty much like an Enid Blyton book. Kind of thinking back, but we thought we were so rare. Just to be clear to the listeners, Martin lives in Kent, in Sittingbourne, and I'm in Ipswich. So we never hung out, but we probably, I'd like to think we would have been friends.
I think so, yeah. I think.
Did you like smoking Consulate?
What's Consulate? Say that again.
We used to buy Consulate were like menthol fags.
No,
so we weren't tough enough to smoke like real fags.
Just pretend like ones that tasted
the
like
minty ones.
Yeah. I used to have a boss that smoked menthol cigarettes, and it gave me a very odd impression of her that it wasn't like real cigarettes, or she did it for fresh breath or something. And it's
smoking for fresh breath is like fucking for virginity. to deliberately misquote something else. Oh, brilliant! The Levelers, I've always been really interested because they very much are a tribal. They are a band that inspired a tribe, or do inspire a tribe. And there are other bands from that era, like Carter and the Unstoppable Sex Machine, another one that I've played with Fruitbat a few times. He's a thoroughly lovely man, but all the people. I'm trying to think how to explain this quickly. One of my bandmates, Daz, in Dystopian Sound Collective, half of his friends, he knows them because they just kept bumping into each other at Carter USM gigs. And I always got the impression the Levelers was very much the same thing. There's some festivals I've played where you see more Levelers t-shirts still than any other band t-shirts.
Yeah, I think they still hold the record for the largest main stage crowd at Glastonbury.
Wow.
I think it was 92. And it was because of that time, the whole movement of the criminal justice bill and all that sort of thing. And a lot of people were jumping onto the Levelers because they were opposing all that sort of stuff.
They were really, Battle of the Beanfield, and they were very, very vocal about it. In fact, I remember it might have been at the time watching a documentary about Glastonbury, which would have been like 2:00 in the morning on Channel 4 or something. But yeah, the Levelers were a big part of that document. God, I'd love to see that again. Yeah, because it's pre-massive Glastonbury. Before it got like the huge thing it is now. It was still big. Glastonbury was a big deal back then. God, no, I might see if I can dig that up. Right, we ought to move on to the next one.
Man can go get fucked beside the ditch. Sail around my neck, fall out every stitch.
I love this because when I played Fuck Buttons, you were just like, you didn't exactly shrug, but you were just like, no idea. With that, you're knitting your brow and you're trying to figure out who it was.
A bit about, well, excuse me a second. A bit of trying to work who it was, but also just enjoying it. I think
I love that bass line.
Pulled me in straight away. Yeah, because first of all, I focused on the vocal, but then it was the bass line that was like, oh, okay. So there's actually a bit more than just waiting, like a tense pause, ready for the crash in sort of thing. But no, again, I don't know who it is, but I'll be intrigued to check them out now.
That was Queens of the Stone Age.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Well, I have checked them out already. So
you might have heard of them. But the reason I chose that, it's from Songs for the Deaf, and that is called Song for the Dead, that one.
Is it?
So we saw them play at V, I think it's V 2002. So that's Nick O'Veary, the original Queens of the Stone Age and Caius bassist, playing on that, and he was in the band at the time, and that's Mark Lanigan singing.
Yep.
And he was in the band at the time. They sort of didn't wheel him out. He came out to do that song, and we were genuinely scared of him. V Festival, been to Reading, been to a bunch of festivals. And V Festival it was not the nice festival.
Yeah,
people at V were horrible bastards. The crowd was just awful. But Mark Lanigan came out and just sort of stared down the entire crowd, and everyone stopped misbehaving because they were scared. But the reason I'd love to go back is that was real golden era Queens of the Stone Age. This album had just come out. They'd just had a hit with No One Knows, and No One Knows was like played on just constant rotation on MTV2, back when MTV used to play music. And that set, I wish I ought to look it up and see what the set was, because it would have been the absolute peak first phase Queens of the Stone Age.
I've got that album. I've got quite a few of their albums, and I didn't recognise that. Was that a live version?
No, that's from the album. That album's almost perfect in my opinion, but it carries on for too long. There's like 3 or 4 quite weak tracks after this one, actually, I think.
Going from the album before that, it's like, to me, it's almost like the transition between Appetite for Destruction and Use Your Illusion. They become big and have a bit of money behind them and do more stuff. I mean, yeah, it is a phenomenal album, and there's bits in there. You know, Dave Grohl was on the drums, wasn't he, for that album?
He didn't play with them because, interestingly, Foo Fighters were on same bill about 3 acts before Queens of the Stone Age. So they were 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon, Foo Fighters. And then later on, as it was just turning to dusk, it was Queens of the Stone Age. And then I think Coldplay headlined, and we went to go and watch Underworld on the other stage instead.
Yeah. I think I did that at Reading once, went to watch Underworld instead of Manic Street Preachers, I think. Or someone instead of Manic
Underworld's
Street
a safe bet, in my opinion. There was no one there. Literally, it felt like us and about 4 other people watching Underworld.
Oh, no. I saw Queens of the Stone Age again with our mutual friend Mafro this summer.
Oh, really?
In Margate, yeah. And
Margate? Where in Margate?
At the theme park in Margate, Dreamland.
Shit, I would have gone to that.
So they've got a proper stage outside. Well, they've got an indoor bit as well, where I saw the Levelers a few years ago. That's a good venue as well. But outside, it felt like it had a festival feel to it. You know, sort of nice atmosphere. It's enclosed, obviously, and it's not as big as a festival, but it just felt really, really nice. And I had such high hopes for a gig, and I was really disappointed.
Oh no! Why?
I think he was drunk. They came on late, and I'm not annoyed that he was drunk, but it meant that they came on late, and therefore the set got cut short, and it ended with, for about 20 minutes, the PA had been cut, and it was just, you could just hear the drums. They were still continuing to play. The people at the front could hear the amps, but us a little bit further back could just hear the drums. And I was like, man, this cost a lot of money to come and see this band that I wanted to see for years.
How much for tickets?
I want to say about 70 quid for that.
Yeah, that's a lot. I said earlier, 100 is not bad, but 70 is a lot. It's a lot of money to see a band play through just their amps on the stage.
Yeah, it was. I mean, loads of people were really, really loving it still, but I think they were the people that were drunk or stoned, and the sort of people who shout out like they know Josh. They go, "Yeah, go on, Josh, keep playing, Josh." But he doesn't care who you. Yeah,
He probably
Love
can't
you,
even see
Josh.
them. I love all three of you people. Or is it one person?
yeah. And the other thing actually that annoyed me. Sorry to hijack your
No,
Queens of the
please
Stone
do.
story.
This is the whole point.
He was coming out with all this spiel about, we haven't been over here for a long time, and I just wanted you to know that you're all special, and I love you, and like we're together in this, and etc. 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 And people were loving it in the crowd. They were like, "Oh, that's so nice of him," sort of thing. And then I saw some videos of the rest of that tour, and he said all exactly the same stuff every single night. It's just scripted.
Oh God, no! It is. There's something that he does. I've seen them a ton of times, mostly at festivals. I honestly don't know, 7-8 times maybe. And I can remember, I can't even remember where it was. It was a festival. It might have been the Wireless Festival or somewhere in Hyde Park. And after a song, he was pointing into the crowd and was going, this person's throwing shit at me. I'm going to come fucking find you, and stop throwing shit at me while I'm trying to play. And he was kind of going, look, I've been sick, I've been in bed, and I've come up here, and you just stop throwing shit at me. And I was like, everyone's like booing, and I was like, wow, no way. Who the hell would throw? I think who would throw stuff at Josh Homme? He's like 15 feet tall. They had a punch up with Terrorvision backstage at Reading Festival. Terrorvision and Queens of the Stone. That was when Nick O'Berry was still in the band. I would not mess with that era, Queens of the Stone Age. And then I saw a video clip on YouTube of them playing somewhere else, and he was going, "Hey, this guy's throwing shit at me." And then the live recording, they did a live album recorded in London called, I don't know, Through the Years and Over the Woods or something or other. Halfway through that, hey, this guy's throwing shit at me. And I was like, come on, what a weird thing to do, like every single gig.
Yeah. Unless people are genuinely throwing stuff at him.
Maybe it's the same guy, just like following him around. Fuck's sake, it's you again, is it? Robert, we've talked about this. Oh, man. So that's Queens of the Stone Age, but I just think I'd love to go back and see that set. And it's one of those ones where I think that there is a recording of it somewhere, because there was for years and years and years, there was TV quality footage of them doing Skies Falling from that same gig. So it's out there somewhere. Right, so let's go for your last choice. And this surprised me. Well, Guns N' Roses surprised me, to be honest. Levelers didn't surprise me in the slightest. And I think I would have almost been disappointed if you hadn't chosen the Levelers. But this one... That's just wonderful. Who's that?
Yeah, that's a band called Godcone. And last night I was really trying to remember who even was in that band, because it was people that I knew at the time.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So they played
a local band in Kent, or
so they were from Sittingbourne.
oh wow.
Yeah, and they played at a venue called the Rainamost House, which was a really good gigging venue back in the day.
Rain the most.
Rainham is the town that it's in. Rainham in Kent, and it's called the Oast House because it's in an Oast House.
Rain the most house.
No, that's a good name for a venue though. And this would have been going back to sort of 96, 97, so just as I was leaving school, at the age of about 18. And yeah, this band called Godcone were playing, and we knew who was in it, but it was the first instrumental band that I'd ever seen. And I thought, wow, to be able to carry songs. Obviously, I have different opinions of instrumental bands now, and of course it's doable. But at the time, I'd not experienced it before. I thought, wow, to be able to write a song that doesn't need words or singing, that can carry you all the way through from start to end, was really special. And this particular gig, there was loads of us there that all knew each other. Again, it was like a bunch of mates going out and watching music. But the reason this one sticks out is because there's a moment that is one of those sort of things that goes down in like local music folklore, almost like a legendary event where they were known for being an instrumental band, but then all of a sudden there was someone on stage with a mic and a mic stand there, and he came on, and for years afterwards, do you remember the gig when the cowboy came on? So he had this big hat and big cowboy boots, and he just did this narration over the top of one of their songs, and it was so, I'm getting tingles thinking about it, but it was utterly uplifting and euphoric, and it was just a performance. And this guy was in the year above me at school, didn't really know him, but I knew that he did acting and all the plays at school and stuff, so he was a performer, and he absolutely nailed it. And the only bit I remember lyrically from that was the very last line where he went, and packets of B&H. And B&H is Benson and Hedges cigarettes, of course, in case there's any non-smokers out there. But it was just this feeling of utter joy, because I knew the people on stage, and I was like, wow, to be part of this moment. And everyone was just sort of dumbfounded by this spectacle. It was a spectacle to see this guy that looked like a cowboy doing this.
Stylistically, that's quite a choice, isn't it?
Yeah, just doing a monologue over the top of this heavy instrumental band, like really sort of trippy and strobe lights and all that sort of thing. Yeah, it was really good, and I'd love to see that again, because it was just, like I said earlier, a multi-sensory experience.
Well, one of the things I love about doing this podcast, and I'm kind of assuming you know Sam, because he was part of Punk News. He was one of the main guys. He was
okay.
Dropkick the Dead, or DK, whatever the acronym. I think you'd know him if you saw him. You'd be like, oh, yeah, that guy. One of the things I really like about doing this podcast is that talking about the other person, your choices or Sam's, or got a couple of other guests lined up because Sam's away on, I keep saying he's on tour, which he kind of is that it brings back so many memories of my own. Mm. I think if you sit down and, well, like we did, we both had a task to think up 4 tracks that gigs that and it really gets your brain going. But listening to your things has brought back so many memories of my own. So we saw this band called Bosk.
Oh, I know Bosk.
Venue in Ipswich called the Drummer Monkey, which is, don't look for it now, it's gone. And that was just after I first heard Pelican, saw Bosk playing a tiny little place. I think they're a reasonably big band now. But after like 3/4 of an hour of them doing probably a song and a half, this guy leapt out from behind one of the amps and just did the whole Cookie Monster thing, which that was a similar thing. We're like, whoa, yeah, we didn't know who they were, and it wasn't, that sounds like a far paler version of what you discovered, but it just reminded me of that. And I found out through a friend who was in a band who were on the same label as Bosk that he'd hidden behind so many amps, he actually ended up doing his back in, because Bosk had played just squad by them.
I saw Bosk in the Tap and Tin in Chatham in Kent. Again, years and years ago. It must be 20 years ago. And my only memory from that was that it was just so ear-crushingly loud and deep. Because I remember walking out after 15 minutes because it was seemingly the first note of the first song still. But of course, these days I appreciate all different types of music for what it is. So I definitely wouldn't rule out listening to them again. Like I think what you were saying earlier, you appreciate folk now. And I think as we get older, there's bits from all music that I can pull out and appreciate rather than just writing it off completely.
Melodeath is one that took me by surprise. You know about the genre Melodeath?
No.
It appeared to be mostly Finnish bands. And people in Finland are very staunchly not Scandinavian. They you can't. They'll point that out if you mention it. But they're bands who, honestly, Finland's an awesome place, and they are heavy. I mean, properly heavy bands. Double kick and everything, and a bit of the Cookie Monster vocals. But then the rest of the vocals are much more like folk. And like phenomenal singing, like proper melodies, like the quality of the songs. I don't know how else to put it. Really, the quality of the songwriting is, some of it verges a little bit into Eurovision territory.
Okay,
but a lot of it is just super heavy music. But the musicianship is just absolutely Melodeath. The bands like Insomnian's the really big one. And again, I'll send you some links, but I never saw that coming. I never saw not only me getting into metal, but then getting into like subgenres of metal. But now I discover new music just by I use Tidal, just launched Tidal, and I've been using it for long enough. The algorithm's pretty good at suggesting stuff to me, and I'll give anything a go now.
That's cool.
I kind of wish I'd been like that as a teenager.
Yeah, I used to use Last FM back in the day.
All right.
Put a track in, and then similar to what you're saying about Tidal, I think, is it would just then find something linked to that in some way. Is that
what that site did?
Yeah.
Oh,
did for
man,
me anyway.
I would have used that all it only worked like that for you. Just no other users at all. Oh, man. Oh, crap. I've just noticed the time. Right. But yeah, that Godcone, I'm definitely looking up Godcone. When you sent me the link so I could clip it for this show, I was like, this is Andrew music. This is.
Yeah. So I think they actually recorded that. They got back together with a slightly changed, with a different drummer, I think, to specifically record that because they didn't record properly back in the day, in the 90s. So they recorded in the 2000s, I think, for that.
There must be loads of bands like that because all recordings sounded shit unless you went into quite an expensive studio, which, of course, no one had any money to do. Nowadays, you can... Well, I can certainly crap out any old junk without stepping into a studio. Right, so here's my final choice. I wasted so much time last night trying to choose which bit of this band to clip. In the end, I just did it at random, and that's not a great clip.
Okay.
There's a band called Burst, who I've mentioned so many times over the last 50 episodes of Beat Motel podcast. I chose them. I'll explain who they are first. They're a Swedish band, and they were on Relapse in the early 2000s. So, decent record deal, hanging around with really good bands, but I don't think they ever really had much success. They made 3 albums, which are phenomenal. And that clips. I sort of worry with bands like Burst because I can't express how wonderful I think they are, because if you play a little bit, you don't get the full feeling. So songs are fairly long, musicianship really surprising, really, really good. It's not all just like foot to the floor metal. They're not really metal at all. They're more like hardcore, but then some of the singing's a bit shouty, some of it's really melodic. But the reason I chose them is I was at a metal festival called Helsinki, and that's 2 L's in Helsinki, in Finland, earlier in the year. And this band came on, and we didn't know who they were, and we'd been watching, the whole kind of leather-clad sort of Finnish metal bands, and very much enjoying them. And then we went into what was an ice hockey arena and saw this band Burst come on. And they absolutely blew me away. I was completely transfixed for lots and lots and lots of reasons. And I've since come back and listened to their recorded output, but I wish I could go back to that gig, because now that I know the songs, instead of just kind of going, oh, that's interesting, oh, that's a cool bit, I would be absorbing every single second of it. And I'm desperate to see them live again. Really, really want to see them, but they just don't appear to do all that much. Oh God, if they ever listen to this, they'll probably go, yeah, we do it all the time, lazy bastard.
I've not heard of them, and that excuse me, I have to admit that sort of low down in the stomach, guttural sort of growling vocal is something that I just can't get along with. I've tried so much, and I've had so many sort of recommendations of bands to sort of ease me into it and things, but I just can't can't do it.
Do you know, it changed for me, and it was only a few years ago. Bandmate said the problem is you're listening to it as vocals. He said it's not; it's texture. Once that sort of clicked in my head, I couldn't abide it before. I would put something on, and if I didn't like it, did you just do a thumbs up thing? How did you do that?
I didn't. I haven't touched anything.
Oh, it just went thumbs up like that.
I saw that. Yeah.
Anyway.
I thought, maybe this is his end of episode outro thing.
It's just becoming self-aware. Yeah. Once that twigged, I sort of got on with it. I quite like it now. It's now that it's a texture. The problem is a lot of bigger bands put the vocals really high in the mix, and I don't think there's any real reason to do that. It should just be down. It should be quieter than almost anything else in the mix, and then it is just a texture. Because
that's a really interesting perspective. There was a band locally, I can't remember what their name was now, but they did they were very much like, I don't know what you would call it, just like a standard sort of indie rock, I guess, in the early 2000s, maybe late noughties. And they did a thing that was, there was two vocal lines all the time, but I always thought, they're not really doing anything, and there was so much reverb on the vocals that now I'm wondering whether it was an intentional thing to make it as a layer and a texture rather than a vocal line to be concentrated on. That's really interesting. Might have to dig that out.
It's something that once I sort of twigged that, I started to see it in a lot of other music. Because I used to, if I couldn't hear the singing, I'd think, well, it's just been mixed badly. But now my opinion is completely different. And there's some current bands, the South Korean one I mentioned earlier, for example. There's a lot of that where the vocals are very much layered in, and it's shifted my whole perception of how to listen to music, because I think we're so trained to try and latch onto the melody. Because growing up, pop stuff, we grew up during the Trevor Horn kind of pop era, where everything was so focused on the vocal that the music was almost incidental to it. But then when you get more into music, and I don't want to exclude like loads of listeners here, but I think when you're a musician and you play in bands, your appreciation of music shifts, and you start to notice a lot more about specific parts of specific records, and really appreciate the genius of it. And I think Burst might be why I really, really like them, but perhaps why they're not a household name.
Yeah,
I'll send you a clip. I'll send you a really, really cool, and I'll put it in the show notes as well, a clip of them playing completely live in the studio, which it just amazes me. So there you go. I mean, we're out of time. In fact, we're well over time, but that was cool.
I've had fun. Thank you. It was really nice to sort of look back and almost, like, especially that last one, getting goosebumps talking about it, like reliving that moment. Just goes to show how important and special music can be for people.
And we all got our own tapestry. Our experiences are all different, and when we make music, that's part of what informs it. But also, if you're not a musician, then my drummer did this amazing thing years and years and years ago. My drummer, the guy who plays drums, who I'm honoured to be in a band with, my drummer. He made this he got like one of those big clip flames you used to get from places like Athena.
Mm.
And he had kept gig tickets going all the way back to the late 80s. And he just put them all in a big frame. And I thought that was such a brilliant idea, because if I'd ever thought to keep tickets and did that, when you got like glanced up at it and just kind of go, oh yeah, and that's immediately kind of a reminder of the sort of the journey through live music that you've had.
Yeah, that's cool. I used to have all my gig tickets sellotaped to my acoustic guitar.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So that I could remember, but also so people could see how cool I was in the gigs I've been to. But yeah, I don't have that guitar anymore, which is a shame, because it was a proper relic of the time sort of thing. It would have been a great, a snapshot of that era.
That era, well, sort of early 2000s era, I started because I was doing the zine. I always had loads of band stickers. Was such a big thing. Everyone had band stickers, and so I covered our wheelie bins in them, because people nick our wheelie bins.
Brilliant.
And I always thought I had the coolest wheelie bins. And I came home from somewhere one day, and my now wife had got new bins from the council, like smaller ones. And I was like, no, it's like my history's gone, like the snapshot of my life.
And you still went on to get married after that?
Yeah, and she bore a child. Wow. I am a parent. Big child.
End.
Thank you ever so much for joining me, Martin. I've had to really
pleasure.
work hard not to call you Marv.
It's fine.
Oh, I know you as, but yeah, Martin Whiskin, thank you ever so much. Have you got anything you want to promote?
Nah.
Okay, I'm going to say goodbye then. Do you want to say goodbye?
See you later.
Bye. Oh, all right. I'm going to say that before we go. Martin's a voiceover actor. Actor? Is that the right word?
I always say voiceover artist, but I think the correct version is voice actor. I just like to be different.
I'll put a link to your website in the show notes anyway.
Thank you.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Martin. I'm going to say goodbye. Do you want to say goodbye?
Goodbye.